I wonder how much of the problem that we have is that we are too hard on ourselves, or the problems that we have stem from us telling ourselves that we're too hard on ourselves and really not expecting enough out of ourselves. It's certainly something that Socrates would say, that the unexamined life is not worth living. If you're not examining yourself, then what are you doing? And what you're doing is, whatever happens, you're not really taking control over your own life. You make up excuses for why you don't have control of your own life. Oh, it's because I live at home, I don't have my own car, I don't have my own job, so I have to. No, you don't. No, you don't. You can, even within those constraints, you can live differently. You can choose to live differently. Or you can choose to live as you presently are, which in most cases is just a zombie staring forward, moving through life, waiting for something to happen on autopilot. And always convinced that the problems of my life are outside of myself. Oh, it's because of that, or I don't have control over this one aspect. So what would you do if you had more control? Would you really do better with your life if you have no practice for taking control of your life? If you can't even clean your own room, why is it that so many people who can't clean their own rooms are out in the streets protesting, carrying big signs? People whose lives and their bodies are in such incredible disarray, and yet they want to go around and tell the rest of the world how it needs to restructure itself because you can't sort yourself out. And people get out there all day and do that because it's so much easier for me to say, the problems of my life are your fault. But here's the thing, it's not easier. Because if the problems of your life are outside of you, then there's nothing you can do about it. And I know that a lot of people like to accept that because we think that way it's easier. That way I don't have to do anything about it. But the truth is that if they're outside of yourself, there's nothing you can do about it. And how do you think that ends up for you? Do you think at the end of your life you go, I had no control over my own life, but you know what? I'm so happy for it. You can't possibly, because if things went well for you, guess what? You had no control over it. You should be celebrating it, and you know that intuitively. Examine yourself. Better today than when you're 80, if you make it that far. Do you think any of us has a true and accurate perspective of ourselves? No, I ask because there's two things that you've got going on at the same time, which is that we shouldn't allow others to have too much influence over what we think of ourselves, but then we can't ever have an accurate perspective of ourselves. So then how is it one can ever have a view? Because if we don't get it from people who are able to objectively look at us and see us and say, this is how you're behaving, this is how you're coming off, this is what you're, versus if we're only able to look inside, it's like, I don't know, has anybody in here ever lied for a bad reason? Haven't all of our lives always been for the best and for the good reason and for other people? Even at the detriment of ourselves, just to help others because we love them and care about them. That's why we lie to our parents about where we're going and what we're doing, and that's why we lie to our significant others about who we're really talking to, who's really in our DMs, because they just wouldn't understand. We'd get pissed if somebody was in their DMs, but that's because you can't trust other people. You can trust yourself. You follow? Yeah. So I don't know if, I wonder how much of the problem that we have is that we are too hard on ourselves, or the problems that we have stem from us telling ourselves that we're too hard on ourselves and really not expecting enough out of ourselves. Like, for some reason it struck me a lot in the past few weeks how many people are posting about how, for all of you who, this would be like a generalization and probably a hyperbolized version of it, but for all of you who woke up today and are operating despite generational trauma, and that you're working through your trauma every day. And we'll read that and we'll be like, yeah, I'm working through my trauma. Are you really? Or are you indulging in it? And I wonder why it is that we are placing such an emphasis on dealing with our trauma these days and insisting that we've all been traumatized in horrible ways, and then we're dealing with it, and yet we have higher rates of mental illness than we've ever had in the history of the world. I almost wonder if indulging in it makes it worse, because there's a difference between dealing with it and just acknowledging it and then broadcasting it think about who some of our favorite influencers are. I wonder how many of them will point out, be in a great mood and say, hey, yeah, I had depression. I dealt with it. I'm great now. Everything's fantastic. Yeah, I used to hear voices, but you know what? I took care of it. Everything's great now. Or how many of us will say, oh my God, they suffer from that too, and then we connect with them. There's a word for that, man. Actually, I'm sorry, there's a term for that. It's called trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is very bad. In other words, you've been through a trauma, I've been through a trauma. Well, you know what? We should connect over that trauma. And then we sit around, we talk about it all the time, and that becomes part of our identity. Now, if you are over it and I'm not, guess what that means for our relationship? Not only do I lose you, but you also now lose me. So we either have to both be over it, but then of course that means that one of us is going to get over it first, or it means that we're both going to have to stay mired in it. And so I point this out because it is it's a difficult paradox, because having said that, have any of you ever done something, like maybe a bad thing you might consider, but for the right reasons, and then everybody else assumes the worst about you? That's another thing that happens as well. It isn't always just that we justify our own behavior. It's also that other people, particularly people who don't really care for us, that people who don't particularly care for us, are going to see the worst in us. What else? Others? Yeah. Those put downs are interesting. What would be a place that you might get, what would be a good thing that you'd achieve that you wouldn't want to say anything about necessarily because of a concern of, what would be an example of that? I'm going to show you this story. It doesn't matter what it is. Did you go to the moon? Oh, damn. Did you go to the moon?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we went to the moon, but I don't know what happened to your hair on the way back. You follow? Or, dude, I went to the moon. Oh my God, it's so great you went to the moon, Scanlon. Yeah, but I don't know, my hair got messed up, though. God, I'm having such a terrible day. You follow? You ever pay somebody a compliment or you try to celebrate with somebody and then they immediately point something out terrible about it? Like, oh, I like the way, I like your outfit today. Yeah, dude, I scuffed my shoe this morning though, man, it looks terrible. I just gave you a compliment about the overall thing. And yet we almost feel like we have to put ourselves down in some way, almost like we're expecting other people to do it for us, but if we do it first, then the criticism isn't as valid. I hope what you're seeing here is this confusing back and forth that I'm laying out. Are there people who hold themselves at a much lower standard than they hold other people? They expect way more out of other people? Yeah. Haven't you noticed that people put themselves down so much, but they elevate other people so much? Yeah. Are both of those true? Yeah. So the point is that where then are we aiming for? Because whatever we say about people is going to be true. I'll say it again. Whatever we say about people is going to be true. Are people too hard on themselves or too easy on themselves? Yeah. Have you noticed? Are people harder on other people or too easy on other people? Yeah. It's true. You've seen it, right? Whatever complaint we make is going to be true because people behave in all kinds of ways. So then the question is, how do we then, what should we be aiming at? And something we've been talking about all year, you have a virtue in the middle and you have vices on both sides. Should you put yourself down very much? No. Should you be honest with yourself? Yeah. But being willing to be honest with yourself means that you're going to be willing to accept what you find and be willing to make a change about it. Because if you're approaching yourself from this perspective of, I just got to accept myself for how I am, you're not going to be honest with who you are. You're going to sugarcoat it. And you might think it's the opposite, right? Like, oh, if I just accept who I am, I can be brutally honest with myself. No, because those two things are very difficult for most people to hold in their mind at the same time. You know what? I'm going to be honest with myself. I'm a low-life, backstabbing, manipulative bastard. I really am. But you know what? Love me for who I am. No, most people are not going to be able to hold those two things in their heads. They'll approach it from this perspective of, let me for who I am. That way I don't have to change. And then you reason about yourself in such a way that makes it feel like you don't have to change. And then you can kind of wipe your brow and go, oh, thank goodness I don't have to get any better. Versus if you approach it from this perspective of, things in my life are not going well. Or things are going well, but it's so tenuous. And I find that I keep having to lie or manipulate or whatever to maintain this facade to keep things going properly. And hopefully you recognize if you do that, things are going to collapse eventually. And so instead you approach it from this perspective of things are not going well for me, or things are going well for me tenuously. I need to examine myself so that I can make the proper changes to make these things either true about myself or to make my life better. In other words, it's not approaching ourselves from the perspective of accept me for who I am, I'm going to accept myself for who I am, versus I'm going to examine myself properly so that I can make changes. Two very different purposes. And if you can approach yourself from that perspective of I want to know more about myself so that I can make myself better, at that point you can be very honest with yourself. But you also want to make sure that you're not going on the extreme either. If you try to be careful, be very, very careful with words like always and every and everyone. I'm always manipulating, always, 100% of the time. Right now you're manipulating. When you say you're manipulating. Oh, you know what I mean. No, I don't. Say what you mean. Say it to yourself anyway, so that you can be clear about it. I manipulate in these specific circumstances. Then you can know why you do that in those specific circumstances. Do you lie to people who are in positions of authority? Do you lie to people who are in positions of authority out of fear of discipline? In other words, like to cops or APs or whatever? Or do you lie to people in positions of authority because you want to get benefits out of them? So in other words, even down to the specifics about why you're doing it, because then you can examine yourself and know some things about yourself. It's certainly something that Socrates would say, that the unexamined life is not worth living. If you're not examining yourself, then what are you doing? And what you're doing is, whatever happens, you're not really taking control over your own life. And this is one of those things that leads to long-term happiness, that leads to long-term joy. We've talked about Diogenes a little bit. Did Diogenes have control over his own life? Yes. I'll answer that question for you as you stare at your desks. Do many of you have control over your own lives? No. Sometimes you'll try to pretend that you have the illusion of it, and you'll even make up excuses for why you don't. Yeah, my daimonian is not telling me to stop, so I will. Most of it, you're not even considering. Sorry, you make up excuses for why you don't have control of your own life. Oh, it's because I live at home, I don't have my own car, I don't have my own job, so I have to. No, you don't. No, you don't. You can, even within those constraints, you can live differently. You can choose to live differently. Or you can choose to live as you presently are, which in most cases is just a zombie staring forward, moving through life, waiting for something to happen on autopilot. And always convinced that the problems of my life are outside of myself. Oh, it's because of that, or I don't have control over this one aspect. So what would you do if you had more control? Would you really do better with your life if you have no practice for taking control of your life? If you can't even clean your own room, why is it that so many people who can't clean their own rooms are out in the streets protesting, carrying big signs? People whose lives and their bodies are in such incredible disarray, and yet they want to go around and tell the rest of the world how it needs to restructure itself because you can't sort yourself out. And people get out there all day and do that because it's so much easier for me to say, the problems of my life are your fault. But here's the thing, it's not easier. Because if the problems of your life are outside of you, then there's nothing you can do about it. And I know that a lot of people like to accept that because we think that way it's easier. That way I don't have to do anything about it. But the truth is that if they're outside of yourself, there's nothing you can do about it. And how do you think that ends up for you? Do you think at the end of your life you go, I had no control over my own life. But you know what? I'm so happy for it. You can't possibly, because if things went well for you, guess what? You had no control over it. You should be celebrating it, and you know that intuitively. This is why there's a stark difference between people who earn $1 million, or actually $10 million is the study, and people who win it in a lottery. There's dramatic differences in self-reported happiness between those two groups of people. There is a massive discrepancy in happiness, self-reported happiness, between people who earn $10 million and people who inherit over $10 million. People who inherit the money report being very unhappy with their lives. People who win the lottery over $10 million report being less satisfied with their life than before they won the money. Why? Because there's something in us that tells us if I get something for free, I don't appreciate it. And you think about all of the things in your life that you get for free. Think about, you can't even really fathom it. Some of us are sitting here right now going like, crap, is he still talking? Why do I have to be here? Oh my God, I can't wait to graduate. Then leave. Get out. Go. But I can't because I have to. You don't have to do anything except for stay blank and die. For myself, stay white and die. Everything else is a choice. Oh, but then they're going to make me. Okay, slave, then get back to work. If that's all you expect out of yourself, what you're forced to do. And then the thing is that so many people will be here right now, and then they'll be, getting everything for free, which actually means paid for by somebody else. And then they're going to go off and take out massive debts in the next few years to go to college, to a university, and get the exact same opportunities. And yet we'll sit out there with our hands just excitedly shelling out money for stuff we could have gotten for free. And we're going to say, why? Because I get to choose to do that. The point is that whatever you get for free, it's very difficult to appreciate. And if you look at all of the things in your life that you get for free and you don't appreciate, that means you have such a narrow window of things you can possibly appreciate. In fact, it becomes almost impossible to appreciate anything because free shit is just Thursday. It's like if you feel like you're entitled to love, then someone comes along and loves you, well, you just got what you deserved. They're supposed to give that to you because you feel like you're entitled to it. If instead you can appreciate every little thing and you can step back, but that takes examination. I don't deserve this. I haven't earned this. This is grace. This is kindness. And now you can sit there and go, wow, there's so much to appreciate about the world and the people in it. And if you don't have that, how can you have anything except for animosity towards people who don't give you the things that you think you deserve? Or just call it what it is, the things that you think you want. I want that and I don't have it. But that's because some stupid billionaire has it. So 6th grade, man. Go back and read the manifesto, man. Try to make it make sense as though it wasn't written by a 7th grader. Instead of being able to look at our lives and appreciate the things that are there, and that takes effort. It's not easy to do. How do you even notice the things that are around you? You walk past trees and bushes and buildings and things that you've been walking past for years and you don't even notice them because you don't stop to examine them. Those are just trees and bushes and buildings. How much more about the little things in your lives? How about the people in our lives who wake up early and go do jobs that they hate to give us the things that we then use to distract ourselves from becoming better? The whole reason they do it is to make us better, to hope more for us, so we can have more than they had. And yet we use the tools and the gifts they give us to make ourselves worse, distract ourselves, and get dragged into a future kicking and screaming to a point where they got to drop 40% of our credits just so we can just skate by, coast by. And we sit there and go, yes. And yet, why? Because we don't appreciate it. Because we can't. Because we think we're entitled to it. Because we don't stop and examine it. The point of this is all that there's so many things in our lives that your life will be made so much richer if we could stop and appreciate those things that we've grown accustomed to and assume to be owed to us. If instead you can say nothing is owed to you, anything, you can appreciate a hell of a lot more. It's true. No one knows how bad he is until he tries very hard to be good. Try very hard to be good. Think about how many times in a day you have negative thoughts about people or things, and how many of you are having them right now. And then think about how many times in a day, hundreds and hundreds. And yet we'll say, but you know what? Deep down inside, I really am a good person. Well, why do all these lemons keep coming out of you, apple tree? Why do all these negative thoughts manifest inside of you if you're such a wonderful person inside? Well, just because you have bad thoughts doesn't mean you're a bad person. Okay. How would you define it then? A person who does bad stuff. And where do you think bad stuff comes from if not bad thoughts? And if you don't even examine yourself, your bad thoughts manifesting into bad actions are just the trees and the bushes and the buildings that you walk past every day. You don't even notice them because they're just part and parcel of yourself. And then when someone points it out, It's the same as when someone comes along and points out that we're unappreciative. You're just a hater. You just don't understand. Shut up. If you knew anything, you'd have a TikTok channel or something. So, examine yourself. Better today than when you're 80, if you make it that far. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Yeah.
You know, you really don't need